I'm sure here shortly. So we'll start our meeting, Kim, 4:31 this afternoon. The first order of business is to elect a committee chair. Do we have a motion for education committee chair?
Yeah, I'll nominate J.P. Clausen.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll move that the nominations cease.
Are there any other nominations? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Kim, we have a new education committee chair, JP, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. So I think we just have Pbis presentation, and then in general, right, and then Ann can talk about what's going on here.
Yes.
If I may, we do need to approve the minutes first from the last meeting.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's okay.
My computer is also totally dead. But so yeah, so take a motion to approve the minutes from last time. So everybody.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All right. We vote on that, Ken?
Yep, just need to do all in favor.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. Now we can start our presentation.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds good. So I'm Laura Daly. I'm the Director of Learning Supports, and one of the areas that we oversee in our learning support department is Pbis. There's a lot of other areas that we also oversee, but I thought I would also introduce Corinne Frank. She's our coordinator of mental health. We have been the two in the last year and a half since I took on this role, and Corinne's been in her role for, what role? 10, 12, 10-ish years. And so we've assumed the responsibilities to oversee Pbis, and then we'll give a little overview basically of Tier 1, just some main components and what it looks like, what it kind of takes to implement it at the building level, for some considerations then for you as a board to think about everything that goes into this Pbis process. And then why don't we go ahead and introduce the Tate staff, because then you probably want to hear more from them, because they'll be able to say this is what it looks like in implementation at the building level. So I'll kind of do my little overview first. Corinne might add some things as we go along, and then we'll go right into Tate's presentation. We'll just switch things up here really quick.
Okay.
So go for it, Ann.
So I'm Ann Browning. I'm the principal at Tate High School, and I have 3 support staff with me. They're on my team, and they've helped me. So
Jesse Smith, MTSS and reading teacher.
Christina Brown, guidance counselor.
I'm Kate Ritchie. I'm 11th, 12th grade English teacher and an IDS in the afternoon.
We appreciate them being here as well, and all the
just
great
one
work that
quick,
they've done.
The abbreviation that you used after your name, what was that?
It's the multi-tiered
System of support.
systems of support. It's the
I'll
umbrella of the PBIS.
I have like a slide in here that might explain what MTSS is and kind of what it stands for and what that role in a sense does. So today what we're really doing is just giving this overview that we talked about, just some main components. There's a whole bunch more to Pbis. That's the thing I think is really important to understand. So we're just scaling it down just for today. And we're focusing on Tier 1. And later in the presentation, you might wonder, well, how many tiers are there? We'll go over that really quickly so that you can see what that is. So, and it's important considerations. Can you see this? Okay. I don't really want to stand right in the middle. But some important considerations for Pbis are kind of taking away some of the words in red. This isn't a packaged curriculum. It's not content. It's not something that you specifically deliver to students. This is a framework, it's a structure, and it's about the systems that you have in your building to promote positive behaviors, as well as individualized interventions. And so it's all about creating a positive learning environment, it's all about the culture in your building, it's about teaching and reinforcing appropriate behaviors, and ultimately preventing problem behaviors. We know that everything we do in schools promotes behavior. It's just, are we doing the things that are promoting the behavior that we want? And so those are some of the things that we have to think about as we go through Pbis. Again, it's based upon prevention, teaching, practices, and systems. It's not a core content at all. The benefits of school-wide Pbis in general are a reduction in office referrals, improved learning, you're maximizing the learning environment, you're dealing with fewer disruptive behaviors and able to provide more prime instructional time for all students. You're implementing an orderly, predictable, safe, and positive learning environment. Teachers feel more effective in general, and parents and students report positive change. So those are just some outcomes over the years that PBIS has been implemented nationwide that the research has shown. This relates to MTSS, Phil, that's the what you were asking about before. We do have some positions at the secondary level that are MTSS roles. And so what this whole MTSS thing means, it stands for a multi-tiered system of supports. And some of you probably bring a lot of background to this, but in a nutshell, what this means is we think of a tiered approach when we're delivering any kind of an educational service. And this triangle represents different tiers. You'll see that most of this is green, so the green represents what we call tier 1. And we think of it in terms of academic as well as behavioral supports, that's a part of the whole educational process. They have to be blended and meshed together. We try not to always separate those because social, emotional, and behavioral supports are the precursor to really being able to access the academic educational environment. And so tier 1, the universal teaching and any type of support represents what we're teaching to kids on an everyday basis. Typically, that meets the needs of about 80% of our student population. That's whether we're teaching the expected behaviors, we're teaching the math curriculum, we're teaching the science curriculum. That's what's embedded within the 80%. The tier 2 is what we refer to when we say targeted interventions or additional. It means the core. There's different words, core, universal, tier 1, that's all synonymous with the green, the tier 1. The tier 2 is more core plus more. Students that need additional interventions or support on top of, not in place of, but on top of the tiered supports that they have here. So for PBIS, for example, schools would be teaching the expected behaviors, modeling, implementing reinforcement and an acknowledgement system for all students. So that's the foundation. That's what you start with when you're building and you're implementing PBIS, is what do we want all students to know and be able to do for behavior. And you implement practices and procedures that you learn through training that we currently tap into Grantwood AEA to provide our training for us to implement supports for all students. Then some students, that's not quite enough for. They might need a little more social skills instruction. They might need a little bit more explicit instruction and behavior supports. They may need an attendance plan. They may need just some additional support. So that's what the tier 2 interventions are intended to be. They're intended typically to be group-based. You can implement them quickly. You don't have to overthink it. You use your data and your systems that you learn through PBIS to determine a good match of an intervention. Then tier 3, we call that the top of the triangle. That's where it blends into the red. That's typically up to about 5% of your students that need more individual interventions and supports, whether it's academic or behavioral. And so this process is what many people in a building help implement and oversee, whether you're talking academics or behavioral support. But we do have some specific roles in our schools that also particularly oversee that process. So that's an overview of the model, of the MTSS model. And then this is just another way of thinking about it. I like this visual almost better because this is that green, what all kids get, regardless of whether they're an English learner, whether they receive special education services, regardless of any of that, all students receive that universal tier instruction for academics and behaviors. And then you kind of layer on the supports as it's needed. So then tier 2, again, I explained that already, but that's on top of that. And then tier 3 is so layers are added. So you always start with the core, the universal content and instruction. The Iowa MTSS model, which the Iowa Department of Education endorses and supports PBIS implementation. That's why, of course, we have money funneled from the DE that funnels through the AEAs to provide us the training and technical assistance and support at the local school level. Tier 1 is what we're focusing on today, but you can see that there's a whole system of Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports that as schools implement it, they learn how to implement check in, check out, for example. How do you identify students? How do you collect data? What does that look like? There's different options then for other Tier 2 supports. So you kind of move along that continuum to provide increased levels of supports for students. But students might at any one time demonstrate the need to go to an immediate Tier 3 individualized plan. Or a student might move in from another district and need some direct support. So it doesn't mean that, oh, you have to automatically as a student receive these lower levels of Tier 2 supports. A student based upon need can enter this way, but teams work on decision-making rules, they work on the systems and the procedures for implementing all of this over time. So that's an overview of the model. The Tier 1, what do you do at the building level? So that is, you define your school-wide behavior expectations. Sounds easy, but it's not. Right, Brady?
It's not.
All right. I know because Liberty's he's on the team and implementing that, and I've been through that too as a building principal, is you get people together and it sometimes can be really difficult to decide what are our expectations. We've never really talked about this before. But that's the first step. Then you teach and practice school-wide behavior expectations. So you create a system for that. Schools do it a little bit differently. Some teach it all together. Some do it in their classroom. Some, there's different ways that can be done, but that's the main thing. You have to teach what you expect. A big part of Pbis that we learned through the process is telling is not teaching. And I think that's really important. Telling is not teaching. So we have to teach. You don't just tell kids how to do math or science or social studies, you teach. So that's what we have to think about with social emotional behavioral supports too. Thinking out of a system to monitor and acknowledge appropriate behavior. We know from the science of behavior that what you pay attention to occurs more frequently. And so if you're pointing out the things that our students are doing right or well, that's more likely to increase those expected behaviors. Whereas if we're constantly pointing out what they're not doing right, or they didn't do right, or what they better do next time, then that's what we're paying attention to, and that's going to promote those kinds of behaviors even more. Having a continuum of consequences for inappropriate behavior, and then using data for decision making. Those are the main parts of Tier 1 that the teams learn when they go through training, and then of course there's Tier 2. We've talked about behaviors or prerequisites for academics, because you're going to say, okay, I want you to go work with a small group and work on this math problem together. That takes both sides of that triangle, right? You need to know what your behavioral skills are. How do I take turns? How do I work with a small group? As well as how to do the math content. And so we need to teach those routines, those procedures, the expectations in order for them to engage in the academics. It creates structure. We think about creating a safe, secure learning environment for all of our students. The more predictable and structured it is, the better that they're going to be able to learn. And repetition is key. So there's research that shows that to learn a new skill for average school-age children, it takes them about 8 times to practice and be repetitive and to learn that new skill. To unlearn a skill, to teach a replacement behavior, it takes about 28 times for them to practice that behavior over and over. And so that's why this is an ongoing process. You know, just teach your expectations at the beginning of the year and say, okay, you remember those for the rest of the school year. So that's part of what teams learn when they go through this process too. There's a way that teams learn how to teach behaviors. It's not necessarily always familiar. You know, as in, I didn't learn how to do this when I was an undergrad a few years ago. But those are things that, you know, you learn as you go through, that you have to teach and be explicit about it. So then, we've also learned that not every unexpected behavior needs to be sent out of the classroom and to go to the office. That's actually what we don't want to happen. And so we are learning more and implementing this within our district about the continuum of response that, you know, starting with the lowest level of type of redirect or prompt works in a lot of cases, but then using this as kind of a continuum for a way to intervene with a student, maintaining some positive approaches is really what works the best. So these are some features that all teams work on when they do Pbis. Again, it's identifying your expectations, providing that direct instruction, using high levels of reinforcement and an acknowledgement system, enforcing, predictable consequences, not changing things up all of the time so kids don't know what to expect, and preventing and modifying things based upon problem behavior. If you know that this always happens in this part of your building at this time of the day, that's what you use the data to figure out, well, then you create an action plan around that. And you say, we're going to pre-teach this, or we're going to flood them with reinforcement after we teach it so that those behaviors diminish and go away. And using the discipline data to plan and to do all of that. Some of the things that the teams work on with the staff, it's a multitude of things. It actually takes quite a bit for the PBIS team, the principal, other key leaders in the building to implement PBIS. So it's a big commitment, but it's obviously the right commitment. We are currently implementing PBIS K-8, and Liberty is in their first year, just at the very beginning stages of everything. And that's where we are currently as a district. I think what I'll do is let Ann and her team go, unless you have questions, but maybe it'd be good to see kind of from a school's implementation what it looks like, and then we can do a little Q&A. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm kind of trying to, I'm not doing this on purpose, like I'll take all the time you need. I just want to make sure I honor everybody else's time.
One question to your, to this slide you had where you had your 1, 2, and 3. You had building expectations. Do you have any copies of that? I mean, is that something that we've quantified and actually put on paper?
All buildings do that. They use a actually you'll see an example of theirs probably. All buildings use a matrix, and so you identify common areas such as hallway, lunchroom, arrival, dismissal. You take kind of the big main areas where a lot of kids are throughout the course of the school day. And you take your 2 or 3 behavior expectations. It might be respect, responsibility, and safety, for example. Then you outline and put those in operational terms of, all right, in the lunchroom, we enter with a level 2 or level 0 voice. We stand in line, we keep, and so you, typically what a school would do is have little visuals as well as quick little statements that are easily understood. So that we can use that as a teaching tool. So all schools have examples of them. We could get you some. They might be on some of the schools' websites.
Definitely for Northwest in particular and Liberty. But yeah, I'd like to see them for all of them.
Okay. All right. I will.
Awesome. Thank you.
There we go.
All right. So I just had a few talking points because I know we just have like 15 minutes. So do I have a little more time, JP, or? I'll go through.
Take as long as you.
Okay. So
we're here.
We've been doing it for 6 years. So I was going to tell you a little bit about what MTSS is. I can skip this slide for sure. And this is our framework that I've passed out to you. And I will explain that a little further. But what I wanted to talk to you about was the history at Tate. So we've been doing this now for 6 years. I came over from City High School. I was the assistant principal over there. And I was so excited to come to Tate. And because these are my people. I love these kids. And but when I got here, Joan Vandenberg had said, hey, Ann, we're finishing up a 5-year grant. Could you please, and we promised that the secondary level would do PBIS. Would you be willing to go to the training? And I said, absolutely, we'll go. And it was the best thing we did because it's the foundation of what we've been doing for 6 years. So what we did was we brought students, staff, and myself, and we went to Grantwood AEA training. And like Laura said, we had to come up with our behavioral expectations, and we decided those together. And so we came up with our core values. We wanted to be caring, show ownership for our own behavior, show respect and responsibility. So, and I will back up, at first we didn't even have a mascot. So we were trying to pick out mascots, and they were throwing out all these names, and they're like warriors and this. I'm like, you guys were trying to get a really good perception in the community. So I don't know. And they said, but Ms. Browning, when we think of warriors, we think of our own unique battles that we're battling just to get to school. And I said, I love it. So we stuck with warriors and a shield, no swords. And then we said, what does a warrior look like? They show caring to one another. They take ownership to their own behavior. They show respect and responsibility. And so that's where we started. That's our framework. And we do have, this is my copies of classroom expectations, but they all are centered under the core values of caring and what does it look like. And we even break it down to when you're entering and exiting and entering the room, what does it look like? What does it look like during whole group instruction, small group instruction, and independent work? Now, you might, and we just teach that. When students come, we absolutely say, welcome to Tate High School, and this is our orientation. We love that you're here, and we teach them how to behave right out in the parking lot, in the hallway, the cafeteria, in the classroom. We take them into the office, and we say, this is a quiet place. Maria's on the phone. Please act like this. You're entering a doctor's appointment or doctor's office. You know, make sure she's off the phone. Please ask for permission, blah, blah, blah. We go through everything, all of our teachers. And that is because we need to know right off the bat that they know our expectations. And then when they're misbehaving, we're like, is there something you don't understand about our expectations? Because this is our expectations. But then you catch them being good. And we have core tickets. This is the biggest rap in the secondary high school. We're not handing out tickets. And it's like these tickets are for the teachers. If I give them 25 tickets a day, I expect them to have 0 at the end of the day. And if they don't, I mean, you didn't find 25 kids to compliment. Like 5 kids a period. You need to acknowledge that they're doing it. And I won't lie, my teachers right away were like, why should I thank them for doing something that they already should be doing? And I said, it's not a thank you, it's an acknowledgement. And I'm telling you, PBIS just changed our culture immediately because we were no longer saying, hey, could you please pay attention? Hey, I asked you to get to page 25, could you get out your pencil? None of that, it's all positives, like, awesome job, way to get out, I love the way you're listening. We have to give that explicit feedback. And we mentioned, thank you for being so caring and walking into the room and greeting us, or you are so respectful today, and way to be responsible. This is the 5th day in a row you were on time. And at first it was awkward, but that's the training. We get so positive, it's just all positive. It's no longer negative. And the kids are like, whoa, wow, yeah. And if somebody is acting out, I go to the next kid and we acknowledge them and we hand out these tickets. Again, we don't even care if the worst kid in the room, best kid got a ticket and handed it to the worst kid, because the best kid heard what we acknowledge that they are following our rules and all that. And so we do have a little store during lunch where one ticket is like a Jolly Rancher. And they might have 3 tickets and now they have 3 Jolly Ranchers in their pocket. We have Tateware. They can save up for Tateware. They could be first in the lunch line. We try and think of a lot of free things, but they really do love just to say, no, I got some tickets and I'm going to go buy some chocolate or a Gatorade or something. So it's really nice. Those are our core values, and that's how we always recognize the students if they're following our expectations and it's positive. But in our framework, somewhat like that triangle, we divided our supports into 4 areas. We have academics, attendance, behavior, and mental health. And most of the kids that get sent here from City High and West High, they're sent because they're at risk of not graduating with their cohort. They're falling behind academically. City and West and now Liberty could be like mini universities. They have 7 periods of homework every night, and our students go home and they just don't have those supports. Some of our kids go directly to work. Some of our kids are parents themselves, or they babysit at home. So the last thing they need to worry about is their homework. So we don't even assign homework. Our intention is to get them here all day, and we'll teach. And if they show up, then that's awesome. They're here and they're getting it, and then they can leave at 3 o'clock and not worry about completing homework. Maybe we won't get through 12 chapters, but we'll get through the 8. You know, we're just here to get them here and get them through school. So anyway, that's the academics. And then we work on attendance. And then some kids are sent here because of behavior. And I think that kind of gives us the bad rap in the community. Like if there's a big fight at City or West, and then the kids say, they hear, you have to go to Tate now. And then they send them here, and then people go, what happened to that kid in the fight? Oh, they got sent to Tate. And they tend to think that all the kids that get in fights end up here. And that's not true. And by the time they get here, it's one hallway, there's no drama. And usually the peers that they're fighting with are back at the other school. So, but I'm going to get to Pbis and the behaviors. And then there's mental health. We have a lot of students referred here for anxiety and depression. And it's a vicious cycle because with all that homework, then a teacher might help them get all caught up, and then they fall behind again, and then they're really anxious, like I have to go tell that teacher again that I fell behind in my work and I didn't get that done. And a lot of them just say, I just didn't feel like I could ask questions, and then they stay home, and the attendance. So a lot of, whatever supports we can give them. So I was telling you that we have an orientation, and we teach them exactly how we expect, and then we just positively reinforce it. And the why was, you always want to know the why. There were no expectations. And there were kids out here. When I first got here, I'm not going to lie, I was like, what have I gotten myself into? But the staff was really supportive. We went to this training, and like I told you, it was just immediate impact on the thing. But in the high schools, you kind of close your room and kind of do your thing. Well, we had teachers. I have one teacher on one spectrum who was like, if a student swore at her, maybe she didn't send the kid out to the office or to the RSAC, which I'll tell you about. And I'm like, why didn't you do that? That's not allowed. And she says, well, he has a really bad home life, and I know, and that's okay if I say, and it's not okay. We have really high expectations, and that's not okay. They'll do that at the job. I don't care how upset they were. We need some coping skills, so you need to send them to the office so we can deal with this, or the Student Advisory Center. And then I even had another teacher from the other spectrum. It's like, you don't have a pencil? Go to the office. So it's like, okay, teachers, so PBIS and state has majors and minors. What's a minor behavior that I can handle in class, like not having a pencil? What is a major that this is not acceptable? So within our rooms, we have, all the teachers have been trained on what's a major, what's a minor, and a student gets 3 warnings. We have to keep the academic integrity in the room. So when the students come in and they might act out 3 times, or I need 3 reminders, like, hey, I really need you on task, and then we move on, and we come around. If they're still not on task, we might even pull them out in the hall and say, is there an issue? Can I help you with something? And then thirdly, if they do it again, just say, I just need you to go down to the SAC. And we have a Student Advisory Center where there's a staff member full-time. And we have a hall supervisor, and they know to go down there. So they go down there, and the staff member says, hey, what's going on? You're having a bad day or something. They're like, that stupid teacher told me I was talking. I wasn't even talking. So here they think they're going to manipulate. They're not here. They don't know what they're talking about. And they'll go, really? Was the class just starting? No. Was she doing some whole group instruction? No. Small group. Oh, okay. And you were talking with your peer? And the teacher also knows they have 3 warnings. So they're like, did the teacher ask you? Well, yeah, but my partner kept asking me last night about this party and kept disrupting me, and then they blame me for talking, and oh, were you talking? Like, oh, okay, so there's a misunderstanding, and yet you were talking. And we get them to take ownership. So you were disrupting, and the teacher did ask you to stop. Like, at what point did you think that? When could you tell your friend that you have to talk later? The teacher's already asked me not to talk. So they work through these coping strategies. But if I have a teacher that sent a student, I expect them to go back down and repair that relationship and reteach those expectations. So my hall supervisor will step into the room. Once everybody's working, they'll say, hey, Ebony, could you just step in here? I'm going to go down the SAC, and they're already ready. And she'll say, hey, my expectation is when we do small group that we stay on task. We only have 45 minutes. We really have to get it done. Was there a problem? My staff is really good at modeling how to accept an apology or give an apology, and they might say, well, they kept talking to me. She goes, I'm sorry, I didn't see the other person talking, but when I went over there, could you have, let me know, or, well, I'm not going to snitch, but I did, and then they will eventually say, I apologize for disrupting class. And the teacher will say, awesome, are you ready to come back now? This is what we're working on, this is what you missed, here's your worksheet, but you're free to go to the next class when the bell rings. And a lot of them choose just to go back to class, and when the bell rings, they can move on. We have a rule, if they're in there more than 3 times in one day, we're having a tough day, we're just going to bring all the work to you. And we got a lot of pushback years before from this committee saying, well, these kids are missing a lot of school by being in there. And I said, that's a lesson they need to learn right then and there. We need to either find out what's bothering them. If we have a major, a student swears and says, you're if you're a bitch, and I don't like your class, and they leave, they go right to the SAC, and then I might come down and I'll say, whoa, I'm not going to address the swear word right away. I'm like, what? You seem really upset today. What's bothering you? And they might say nothing, but they don't. They always open up. Like, well, I didn't eat, and I'm really hungry, and she said I couldn't get a granola bar. Oh, well, let's figure out a way to get that granola bar, and then teach them how to appropriately ask for that granola bar and things, and then I'll say, oh, but listen up, we need to apologize. Was that right for you to swear? They didn't know you didn't have breakfast, and they're trying to move things on, and then they'll say, you're right, and then the teacher comes down, they say, I apologize, I should not have sworn at you, and I won't do that, again, and they don't. And then, but if it's really bad, they're in in-school suspension the rest of the day. It's not like, sorry, and then I get out. We have these strict consequences. But that's how the SAC, that's how we teach our expectations. And if I ever get to a meetings at times, we have weekly meetings on our students, and if I have a teacher that says, that kid, I'm telling you, they're driving me crazy. Every day they're going to do this, I say, really? Because they don't have any SAC referrals. And whatever you put up with is what they're going to do. And you have these expectations, and I expect you to get 3 warnings, and you go to the SAC and we talk about it. And every time they're there, it's documented. And we talk to the kids. If we see patterns and data starting to happen, we come up with behavior plans. And we're just like, we're here to help you. How can we help you? And this is where, like Christina, the teachers talk on Mondays. The next day, a smaller group of us meet. We say, okay, who's calling this parent? We call students down. We do attendance plans. We do behavior plans. And this is where we get into more of when we begin to see patterns. But now my teachers are like, they understand that when we do a behavior plan, it takes like 6 to 8 weeks to see a change in behavior. And then when we go back again and we tweak it just a bit, it works. I mean, the kids realize, like, well, I'm being called on everything here. So it's really funny. They come from big high schools, and we do have the one hallway. I remember a kid from West Tech came, when I'm out in the hall, I'm like, the bell rings, and it's just he and I in the hallway. And I go, well, why don't we get to class? Where are you supposed to be? And he goes, you do too much. And I'm like, there I was nailed. I'm like, yeah, we're the only 2 in the hallway, so you got to get to class. But, they appreciate, I think, the acknowledgments when they appreciate the positive, and they understand why we're pulling them in there, and they're not going to get away with it. So that really helps. Jesse's put together a really nice, our data from our office referrals. In the very first years that they were there, we had a lot more, and they're decreasing every year. He even tracks the referrals per day, our out-of-school data and our in-school. And every year it's gone down. And that I attribute that to a lot of our teachers being trained in this, and also our orientation to students. It's just the way we work around here. It's just the way we roll. So I was trying to explain that. I'm going to go back to a few of my other talking points that Jesse wants me to cover. He's like, make sure and tell him this. So it is all school-wide, and we have that common language. So remember I gave you the example of a teacher who said, you don't have a pencil, get out, and then, oh, it's okay, you swore. No, we understand what's a major, what's a minor. We have this common language. It just rolls off our tongue anymore, all the feedback and the tickets and awesome job, and give them tickets at first. And it's funny because they were just so awkward. They're like, I'm not going to hand those out. And believe me, they love them. The biggest, toughest guys we have here are like, am I going to get a ticket? They don't just do it for the ticket. A lot of kids, our teachers now know that kids, they don't want a ticket. And I to this day, I don't want to test my theory, but I think if we took the tickets away now, because our teachers know the common expectations and the behavior, we wouldn't really need them. But I enjoy handing that out. I enjoy seeing them go and get their stuff at lunch and things like that. Through PBIS, teachers learn to prompt the student, redirect them, a lot of times give them that feedback, reteach our expectations, because they are posted up there. provide a choice. Listen, we can finish this here, you could go down to the SAC and finish it, or, and then conference with the student in the hall, things like that. So we're really consistent. And again, I do get upset if teachers say, that kid's just driving me nuts, they keep doing this and this and this. I'm like, well, then you're not, what in our system isn't working that is allowing them to act out? So we ask ourselves that. Let's see, Jesse, missing anything? Oh, we do a lot of conflict resolutions. He's like, yes. A lot of conflict resolutions in the hallway. And, you know, we just want to get the behavior out of the way. If we hear a rumor, like somebody's mad at somebody, I'm like, really? Go get them. Let's go down here. And I'll just say, so I understand that something was put on Facebook and you're really upset, and I understand that you want to beat them up. Is that true? Well, I am mad. And then we just kind of deal with it. We get them and we go back to class. We don't want people start to take sides or things starting to rev up. We do not allow cell phones. If we see or hear a phone, we take it for the day, put it in a locker, because again, I explained we're only here for 45 minutes. We do not have time for this. You have no homework. You can go home and talk on your phone all you want when it's gone and they understand. And I won't, and I'm positive. I'm not going to argue. And if somebody says, you can't have my phone, that's my phone, I pay this bill, you're not having it, I'll say, you have a great night, we'll see you tomorrow. And they have to leave. And I get 100% parent support. If I have a student that walks out, chooses to walk out, they usually come back the next day and say, that was stupid. Now I'm behind. Well, I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm not even going to acknowledge it. I don't count how many times you had your phone. Either if I see it, it's mine. If you don't hand it over, you leave. And I don't even do bargaining. I don't be begging for 5 minutes. I'm like, see ya. And then somebody on the way out, 20 minutes later, here it is. Nope, sorry. I'm gone. I'm long gone. I'm not listening to you. I'm not arguing. So our data is there. Let's see. We hold lots of, we just have so many meetings. Jess, what did I forget?
Okay, so just through orientation, not only, sorry, my voice.
Yeah.
It's just all of our expectations, but also all the supports.
Oh, yeah.
Both academically and behaviorally.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness.
It's a huge part.
So we have huge support. So we do have, we have warrior work time during lunch. If our students, if anybody's getting, and this really helps the kids with attendance issues and academic. But during lunch, the students get a whole hour, and our teachers only get a half hour for lunch. So when, let's see, if they have a D or an F, they have to come back down during their lunchtime and work with the teacher if they have like 1 D or F. If they have 2 Ds or Fs, they come down to this academic wing and they have to meet with both teachers. And during that, so a lot of times we have kids up there and eating lunch and they're like, I have all these Bs and Cs, I don't have warrior work time. But the ones that do have Ds or F, usually the ones who have poor attendance or just work a little slower and need more time, they are assigned to their warrior work time, and it's a small group, probably 5 or 6 people. And the beauty of this is that it's the actual teacher that assigned it that's working with them. It's not another tutor, another teacher. They're working on it and they're saying, hey, listen, let's redo this quiz, or I just need you to finish this test. You needed a little more time, or what was wrong with this assignment? Like, what aren't you getting? And they can really accommodate. So that's warrior work time. And then if my student, the SAC is open, if they're just down here jacking around, not listening, it's like, go, I have to support these people, and I'll help them in the SAC with their work. And then if they really cause problems, or academically, and it's just too much, Jesse, our MTSS coordinator, he has an hour-long group during lunch, and they have to stay in there. It's not just a half hour. And we have warrior work time Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and hopefully Tuesday and Wednesday they could finish the worksheet and get back out there. And they're only in there for a half hour. But if they have to go to LAS, they're in there for the whole hour, and we're really accommodating. So that's warrior work time. And then the SAC is really supportive. Another reason they can go to the SAC, those students with anxiety and depression, if somebody's bothering them, I'm really having a tough day. We have our student family advocate down there who brings them to appointments, talks to them a little bit. And at first the teachers are like, well, they're just going to come down there all, because that's what they want to do. But that's where we keep the data, and we see a pattern. Like, interesting, you're always depressed during science, okay? Like, you can't come down during science. I also watch the number of times my teachers, we keep referrals. Like, if I had a teacher that had 25 referrals and another had 5, it'd be, what's up? What's up with the number of referrals? So we really, Jesse keeps all this data and we really watch it. We do have advisory, which is Monday afternoon during the lunchtime. So lunch is only a half hour on Mondays because they meet with their advisor and they give them progress on all their grades and how are anything at home that you need. They meet with kids, how are things going, do you need any medical attention or, you know, personal attention or counseling or how are things going, and then they tell them academically and they tell them where they're supposed to be the rest of the week for warrior work time, or awesome job, you know, you got everything, or speaking of jobs, do you need a job? You know, we can help you find a job. And then there's academic supports. You've heard of Success Center in other high schools. Well, I feel like kids kind of win the lottery by getting scheduled into a structured study hall with a teacher. So here we do it kind of a triage. If our academic team, which meets on Mondays, we print out the whole entire D&F list and assign kids to warrior work time. But sometimes I might say, you know, they've had this F for 3 weeks, and they click on it, like, oh, they just have to finish this project. We have a teacher available, they'll go down and they'll pull them out of a class and say, let's just finish this project here. You got to get this done. And then the grade comes up and they feel really good about it. And they might only have been in there a week or so. But we do structure like maybe 1 or 2 kids in there that are really just struggling academically. We have mental health supports. Again, I mentioned our student family advocate. We have counselors that come in, and the kids can actually have their counseling appointments here within the building. We have a pantry. Kids get a snack on the way out, and the Johnson County Crisis Center has a pantry, and kids just take groceries home every night. And they're not ashamed about it. They'll just go and they'll take exactly what they need, which is really nice. And then our staff has been in blended learning training for 3 years now, and it's really going well. Everybody has their Chromebooks, and it's really been a nice addition, so we really appreciate the Chromebooks. And they've been very responsible in having them charged. We have the maker space, we have the studio with green, let's see, we do the green screen and the beat station and all that, and then we have some clubs on Fridays. Our teachers offer art club and poetry club and the book clubs and I don't know, these magic
Sports club.
glitter club, sports club. So all this, we just have activities. And then Jesse and Coach Coffrin, we have a basketball team that's been competing in various leagues and tournaments, and they're really proud of that. And so, I mean, we're just very structured. What else did I miss?
Okay, just one last note. She did a great job. It's not, I don't want to,
Give myself a ticket.
so super positive. It's not always the easiest thing here. We have tough kids, but the greatest thing as a classroom teacher and helping out other teachers is that when we have our tough days, when we're really stressed, with Pbis and MTSS, we have a structure, we have a framework, we have a place to go. Whether it's, taking the steps of the prompts and the redirections, sending a kid down to the SAC and trying to problem solve with them. And if we're seeing a pattern and all that, we have our SST meeting, we have our mini SST meeting, we have problem solving teams. Every other Wednesday as needed, we meet as a Pbis team to come up with different plans. It's been a big process. It's not just all rainbows here every day, but I mean, when it is tough, we have places to go, and that's the biggest thing, and we're able to come back, we feel more in control. We're really, the biggest thing is AIM backs us with our decisions, with the teachers, and we have to adjust as we go, but we really try to work as a team. And yeah, there's low points in our year where we need to reflect and say, hey, things are getting kind of loose, we're being inconsistent, what's the issues? But we work as a team and figure that out. So yes, it's a lot of positive, but it's a lot of reteaching. It's a lot of figuring out where there's inconsistencies or holes in our program and fixing that. So I don't want to make it sound like we're perfect. We work at it every day, and all of our teachers work really hard at it. So that's what keeps it going.
I think that, and you're right, like if you came to our building, which anyone is welcome to come to our building, You will see issues, but you're going to see it handled consistently and with respect. The kids do respect us here because we respond to them with care and respect. Like I told you earlier, at first it's like we're concerned about you, but we're going to hold you up to these high expectations of this behavior. And a lot of, well, you got to show me respect or if they get mad at me. I say, I don't ever treat you disrespectfully, and I expect the same from you. And I can come back in 5 minutes when you're ready to talk to me. And I'll leave them and they'll complain and I come back. And because they know they're not going to leave that room until they're out. Like I would say extreme, one girl we're having right now, she's the most beautiful girl until she opens her mouth. She has the most foul mouth ever. And we got to the point where I said, I'm sorry, if I hear one more swear word out of you, you're in the SAC for the rest of the day. And now she doesn't swear anymore. But it took all that to just, we're just really tough on her like that.
Did you want to say something?
And we do, yeah, and we pick our battles, but we document, and we also have this great, even if a student is like, maybe they'll go to 2 warnings every time, like I'm gonna act out until I get it, and by the 3rd I'm gonna be sent out. We just allow our teachers to also just document to the SAC person that say, this person's been, doing this, this, and this, and then she'll print it off, put it in their file, and then, but if other teachers are doing it, then she warns me like, you know what, everybody's been complaining about this student, and we call in the student and meet with them. So, but anyway, I'll just say we do have our academic supports and our behavior models. Like if you're having issues, then we talk about it in our SST, then we follow up a mini SST, we have academic support, so the teachers really understand, like Jesse was saying, where do you go for support and what do I do now? And it's the same with the behavior. We have to start with our Pbis and our core values and constantly reteaching those, and then send them to the SAC and reteach again, and then we come up with behavioral supports, and it's just this cycle, so they totally understand. So.
And it's not like it's, we've been doing it for 5 years, and Jesse and I just did a PD last week with the whole staff re-engaging in Tier 1, because you can't get it, if Tier 1 isn't in place, nothing else is going to work. And so we do it organically from the inside out, that we are in charge of delivering that PD to our staff and reminding everybody, essentially, like Ann and I have always talked, if your Tier 1 is in place, you're going to have minimal classroom management issues. Because if your kids know exactly your expectations for how to enter a room, how to sit down, how to get their materials, you can reflect that as a teacher. Am I having the majority of the problems within the first 5 minutes of my class? Well, that's my procedures and my routines. Or am I having trouble with students pushing back when I give them feedback? That might be error correction. Am I having issues with, a variety of areas? And it's all that foundation one. So, we're kind of at this reset time where we're saying, okay, we're 5 years, we've got it under control, we really feel like it's a well-oiled machine. Now we need to go back and remember Tier 1, and we really need to work on Tier 1, and we're holding our teachers accountable. Every teacher is going to be observed by another teacher in a goal area based on Tier 1, and they're setting that as their own expectations for themselves to say, hey, maybe I haven't been as pointed in this area as I need to be. I want to have another teacher that I'm comfortable with come in, simply collect non-judgmental data and remind me that I need to re-engage in my Tier 1 foundation.
We have to commit, and we got buy-in, we had the why, and the minute they saw the results, the teachers are keeping to it. So there are 3 areas. We can support student behavior by reteaching, having our core values, having the orientation, and the teachers doing this in our incentives. But then I support the teachers. We come up with, we have advisory to share data. We have lots of positives. We send home positive note cards. We have a positive toolbox. We do a lot of 2x10s if you're feeling like the student, it just drives me up a wall, so at lunchtime I might purposely go over and pick out that student, and just for 2 minutes I might say, what'd you do last night? And and at first, nothing. We just talked for 2 minutes, but 10 days in a row. And I picked a girl that I wasn't particularly getting along with, and the first day I was like, so, hey, have you seen any good movies lately? And she's like, what are you, why are you even talking to me? But she did, she's like, no, I don't go to movies. these. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm hoping to see this. And then the next day, I'm like, so, like, do you have any pets at home? Or, you know, and then we just talk for 10 days, and by the 10th day, she's like, here she comes, okay, you know, and we're talking, and we got something. Christina, I'll just never forget one time you did a 2x10 with a girl, and, I mean, it was the saddest thing. You're like, did you just ask her what was the worst thing that happened to her or something?
And she told me about how her mother was in jail, I think.
And her dad died.
And her dad died.
We didn't even know
Yep.
that. And she's like, oh, the worst thing, my dad died, my mom's in jail. I'm like, oh, okay. So she really was able to relate and just help her. It's like they just go through so many things. And then we have the supporting decision-making with our continuous data, our interventions, our tools, and professional development. So, any questions?
And maybe I missed it when you were going through your presentation. How many students do you have?
We have 125.
125.
It's our max. We only have 8 classrooms. We use the cafeteria for home ec and closets for counseling, and the library holds like 3 different classrooms, so we're full.
Would you say there's a line to get in?
Yes, there is a waiting list.
So how big is that?
We are going to graduate this trimester probably about 12 students, 12 seniors early, and we'll probably have 25 referrals, and we'll take 15. So, yeah.
Do you just get referred here and come and then go back to City or West?
You can, if you get all caught up on your credits and you're able to go back, and I would say only about 10%, not even that. Once they get here,
Because I was going to say.
they want to stay.
Yeah.
They're like, I like this school, and they even will say, they threatened, they're like, you're going to have to go to Tate if you don't pass these classes, and then they get here and they're like, we really like this school, and we want to stay here, and,
Yeah, that's the image we want to change.
Yes.
Is that, if something goes bad, go to Tate. No. Tate is, so stress is the alternative. And for students that, have the anxiety and things like that, we need to provide.
And it's the same high school diploma, it's 309 credits, 4 years of English, 3 years of science, 3 years of math, 3 years of social studies.
Yeah, you were saying on your, your academic, or your advisory day on Monday.
Yeah.
Where you go with the students that are having D's and F's and things like that.
Oh,
and bring them up. When you get into a situation with a student that if there's no homework and they're not attending school, obviously they're probably getting into that category. What strategies do you do to bring them back on track, since it's not the type of thing you don't break your rules to send them home with a lot of homework?
No, we don't even send home. So they would go to Warrior Work Time, they meet with the teacher during lunchtime, and if that's not enough, we'll pull them out and do academic supports in the morning. And if that's not enough, we have the whole hour during lunchtime. But they don't like to miss their social time, so they usually get all caught up. And so they can take home homework and do it on the Chromebook, but we don't assign it, and they won't get behind if they're working or have other things to do.
And as a teacher, I'm sorry,
Go
Christina.
ahead.
I can say too, one of the benefits of Warrior Work Time with that smaller group of the students that are really struggling for one reason or another, it is really a great opportunity for a teacher to engage in differentiation. And I think that you're not going to find anybody that works at Tate that isn't a huge champion of alt ed. And so we can try, you can teach content, but methodology sometimes is key. And so we know our students so well that within those small periods of intervention time, I could say, this is my assignment, but this kid has missed 5 days of in-depth instruction. I'm never gonna make that up in 30 minutes. So I'm gonna differentiate this assignment. I'm gonna reach my same outcomes and objectives, but I'm gonna deliver it to this kid in a little bit of a different way. Or if I have a special ed student that is struggling and moving a lot more slowly, I might amend the assignment so that it fits his or her needs. And so we have a lot of autonomy, and gives us a lot of autonomy to do that works best for our students, because the students are what matter in those moments. And it breaks our hearts that there are sometimes kids that we don't get to see enough to get to that point. but we are way more successful, way more often than we give ourselves credit for.
And they'll fail. I'll say, well, you're not gonna pass this class, but you know, we might get fifth year seniors, but if they come to us, probably freshmen or sophomores, they're gonna graduate on time. And then, we have a really high graduation rate. You can't tell because all the kids who are dropped out and seniors and have to come to Phoenix, it lowers our graduation rate. It might take them 5 years or 6 years. But the kids that we have in the traditional alternative high school, there's a high graduation rate. I will say with blended learning, which has been amazing, Jill, who teaches in this class, you know, if you could imagine her up here on the board doing an algebraic expression and balancing both sides of the equation, and somebody maybe has the courage to ask a question and somebody might go, you idiot, aren't you listening? Or something like that. What she's done now with blended learning is she's able to, she tapes herself every day on this ed puzzle, this application. And she'll go, good morning class, okay, here we are again, we're gonna do this chapter. She does her exact lesson and whole lecture on this, she videotapes herself, or just her hand doing it, and she's talking to them. And they come in, and they get on their headphones, and they have the whole unit in front of them. Some kids love to work ahead, and they'll just listen to her. But what she does is that video stops in 3 times, and they have to answer an assessment question. And then she sits up here in her desk and she can watch, like who's watching the video and who answered the question. It gives them the assessment data. And then they go through and then they'll do their assignment and they raise their hand and she'll go around and help them. But what she's noticed that there are some kids who will rewind that video, or her practice problem 3 or 4 times, and they would have never asked a question. And they'll keep rewinding it, or she'll go over and say, how can I help you? And some kids move ahead. But the best thing about it is the kids who are I missed 3 days in a row. I got stuck in Chicago. I had a babysit for my mom for 3 days, or I was sick. They come in, they're not nervous at all. They just go, oh, I left off on Monday. And they get in and they're hearing the exact same lesson that everybody else heard. And so they're not getting behind, and they can get all caught up, and they can do that from home. And then she'll sit in the middle and she'll say who needs help, and some come up and say, I'm not getting this. So it's a whole different atmosphere. It's just really changed things, the Chromebooks and blended learning.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Some quick questions. How are your student classes broken down in terms of like freshman, sophomore, senior? And then how long is your waiting list? And then lastly, just going to throw them out there, with your addition, will you be able to increase your number of students?
I'm going to start with that one and then give the other 2 to Christina. No. I would say with the addition, I got 2 classrooms and a gymnasium. So I love the fact that we're going to get a gym. We can compete and have we do have a volleyball league and a basketball league. But 2 classrooms will bring me up to maybe where I need to be. And I met with the architect and I begged him. I said, please, if there's no extra bells and whistles and cement floors, can I please get 4 classrooms, like just an extra little long, like 2 rooms and put a wall in the middle, and no one will know that we need 4 classrooms. And then, so he's like working out the money. But so no, 2 classrooms would just maybe get us to the point where we're comfortable here with 125 kids, because it's 125 of the neediest kids. I think a lot of people miss that, and there's just so many things. You know, one year I did try and take 143 kids, and there was just a tipping point. Our teachers do so much to support all these kids that when I went above 125 and took 143, you could tell. I had more kids dropping out. We couldn't give them the attention that they needed. With 4 classrooms, I'm thinking I could get to 150, 175, because with the addition of the gymnasium too, and maybe full-time. So I'm hoping we can work that around with the architect. So, but as far as grade level,
I'd say for freshmen, this year we started off with 3 freshmen, but sometimes then for try 2, we tend to get a few more freshmen because they're just not doing so well their first try at the big high schools, or they were maybe identified in middle school but said, oh no, I want to try my freshman year at City or West or Liberty, and then by try 2 they're like, I need to go to Tate. So right now, freshmen, we have about 6.
And then there's 3 on the waiting list for third
Yeah,
try.
for third
We
try.
usually end up with about 10, don't you?
Yeah. Then sophomores, we have only about, I'd say 20 at the most. Right now, it seems, I noticed that we're really heavy in seniors. We're just really heavy. We have 72 seniors listed in our power school now. Some of those are Phoenix students that might be a 5th or 6th year senior trying to graduate. And then juniors, we only have about 50. I noticed it more this year because I didn't have as many IO assessments because everybody was seniors. And the 9th through 11th graders, we didn't have a huge IO assessment
About
population
50
this year.
juniors.
Yeah,
We're
so-
usually lots of juniors and seniors, but we love having all 4 grade levels, so it's, yeah.
Yeah. And then as terms of, I'd say a wait list, it really goes by each try. So we don't have, I'd have to say this year, especially West and City have really gone through our process of a referral process through Tate, and they've fine-tuned their list, whereas before it used to be like 20 students or behavioral issues or lots of, concerns, and we've really kind of came up with a mission, a referral committee, what is a good referral to Tate, and we have committee meetings each try with all of the schools. And so this try, we may not even have a list because they have fine-tuned it and got the numbers down. And then usually when we graduate all of our seniors, August, everyone comes. We don't really have a wait list in August because we've just graduated 50 seniors, so now we have 50 spots. When it really becomes hard is try 2. If you didn't get all of those students in August, try 2 starts to become hard with the wait list. But I don't think we have an ongoing wait list. They kind of, if they're not taken, then the main schools still obviously keep them and try something else. And sometimes they go, oh, that student had till the end to try to get their grades up, attendance better. They had attendance plan, a parent meeting. So they wanted to stay at City. They feel like they can make it work and get their credits. So it's very up and down with fluid with referrals.
I mean, that's, my question is, maybe not a wait list, but is there like a demand for it? Now, if you can say, it's 125, that's a cutoff, well, that's gonna force schools to say, well, we gotta try something different, because they can't go to Tate.
Well, that was kind of my question, and I kind of want to get Brady's view on how Pbis is going at Tate, at Liberty.
It's going great at Tate.
Because
I'm done.
my question is, if we implement Pbis to the level that's been done here, would we see people referrals coming from the high schools to Tate? Because you're seeing some of these things being, taken care of, and it doesn't, I'm just asking a question.
The hard thing is scale.
That's where I wanted to go.
Yeah, scale and time, so I would say, is the board and the community okay with a no homework policy at your comprehensive traditional high schools?
Yeah, probably not. I'm just-
I don't, and are we going to be able to staff? And I don't want to compare our staffing levels at the comprehensive high schools to Tate because they're different, they are different students, but we have our core subject area teachers have 125 to 150 kids every day. That's just their classroom. So
Would you say 80% of those kids?
My
though
one
are
answer
doing
goes,
their
yeah,
work?
that
Or
when
like,
you,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I
80%
get
of your
I get
kids.
it, but I'm just saying though that, but that's where it is different. I mean, that would sort of illustrate
Yeah.
my point is that it is different. So it's harder, the scale issue I wonder about. So we're just early in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
How's
think,
it
sorry.
going?
I would just note too that the no homework policy is our policy, that's not PBIS.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
that's how we support our kids. But I did want to say, with the triangle that Laura was pointing out, I taught it at West High, I taught at City High, or as an administrator at City High. When you have that triangle and you have 80% of your kids, you have 1,500 kids you're not going to have to deal with at
Right.
City and West when they were at their max. And then you have, 200 that you're going to see in the SAC 1 to 2 times and dealing with them. And then you're going to get those repeat offenders, 20 to 50 kids over and over and over. So it's about the size of Tate probably within each high school. And I want to encourage everybody to do it because you could have 9th and 10th grade SST meetings and 11th and 12th grade, break it down into smaller
And I
things.
think it's funny that you say scale, because when we first, of the four of us, I've been here the longest, this is my 8th year. And when we started PBIS, we screamed scale too. We said, this is for a bigger school, this is for a bigger elementary. We essentially, that triangle, when we started PBIS at Tate, was inverted. We were red. We were red. We had kids that had massive behavior problems. They needed massive tier 3 interventions, but we know we couldn't start at tier 3, you have to start at tier 1, and within a period of 5 years we've flipped our triangle and it's become right side up, and we only have this, small group of kids. I mean, I even struggle calling that our group a group at the red, and it's just, it has revolutionized us, but at the time when we started PBIS, there were no schools that could give us any examples or data on how it would work at a secondary alternative high school with a really tough population. And if we can be an example of what can happen and the hard work can be put in, we had people that said it was never going to work too, because the tickets were hokey, or the language was awkward, or the work was just too intensive. But our data proves that it works.
And when we go, I would say that too, for the last 5 years, if you go to the Chicago Pbis conference or some of these other conferences, a lot more secondary schools are taking this on. You have inner city Chicago schools having success with this, Milwaukee schools, rural farm towns, every type of school, when you go and see those meetings and talk to those administrators and teachers and districts, there's a lot of examples out there of it.
Matt's working with Lincoln.
And it's going to look
Nebraska.
different at the bigger schools than it will at ours, just like it looks different in elementary. But each school is able to do it.
So Lynn, because I'm loving to hear all this and all the data, but obviously interested now in scale.
Yeah.
And how we get this in all of the other 3 high schools. And that it's working well at the junior high. So I guess that's my question is, what's that process? And I don't want to take a ton of time with this, but what is staff buy-in looking like? How is admin supporting it? Are we going to places where they're doing it well and seeing the model? How do we move this train? Because I know, and maybe, I get it, I can get tickets, what, high school, I get it, and I have these thoughts, and I've learned, that I was wrong about things, and still have, in my own job, have to keep remembering to keep that positive stuff coming. So I get those hurdles, but clearly, once you're on board and once everybody's trained up, and it is a well-oiled machine, and you're going back and looking at how to tweak things, it's possible, and we know from the research that we see results, just really dramatic results.
One of the first things that I think about is that we rely heavily on our Grantwood AEA to provide the training. And so as Corinne and I have come on the scene, the PBIS scene in the last year and a half, I have experience with it as an elementary building principal in the district. We've really kind of upped the game in terms of what we're expecting for the training and the quality of technical assistance and how they're supporting our teams in the schools. And we've also partnered with the University of Iowa because there are some people there that know a lot about PBIS, just to make sure, kind of a checks and balances, and make sure that the same model that Grantwood AEA has been using and implementing ever since I started PBIS like 10 years ago at elementary school level is the same. Should it be the same? Because essentially it still looks the same, and we're finding that maybe there are some updates and some tweaking that can be done. So we're on that. We're staying in close connection with Amy at the elementary level and Matt kind of overseeing the high schools as well. But we also kind of feel that we need to go slow to go fast eventually. The reason we identified Liberty was it's a brand new school. They're going to need to establish their expectations. They're going to need to do all of these things anyway. And so using that framework, again, that's supported by the DE and the AEA, it just makes sense. They are at the I think it's really important to say, baby stages. And so, there's going to be a natural sense of frustration about, this isn't working. This PBIS is not working because they're not doing it yet. Their team is learning about it. So So it's a huge responsibility on that team, as Brady can attest to, because I'll let him give his rundown of how it's going too. That team really has a lot of responsibility in order to go on their own learning journey about this whole science of behavior and things that they haven't really thought about before, and how maybe to do some things differently. And then they're kind of expected to be the champions for it with the rest of the staff, right in the midst of when they're kind of learning about it themselves. So those are some of the things that we're looking at for how better to support the team, some changes that can be made with how the training model works, how to really set it up for success. And that's on Karina and I, as we work with Grant with AEA and work with the other leadership team at the ESC and get feedback, because we just see how it's going. So buildings that have implemented it and they just need a little refresher here and there, that's great. But to implement it brand new, we're learning as we go. And Matt, he can be here tonight, but Matt's reached out, as Ann mentioned, to I think it's Lincoln, the Lincoln schools.
Yeah, I met in Lincoln, Nebraska has 4 major high schools. I met them in Chicago and asked them to come, and Matt's reaching out, and they're going to come and share their experiences and their ups and downs with getting them going with same demographics, same size as here in Iowa City, University Town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there are other high schools in our AEA area that are implementing it, but we want to, parallel them with the demographics that are similar as ours. So I sat by Brady at the last Liberty training day, and I don't know, it was kind of rough going at times, and it was okay at other times. So Brady, give us a little update. What do you think?
Rain on our parade.
Well, I'm not gonna rain on the parade. I mean, it's going great here. And Tristan Sievers obviously was the SAC here. She's with us at Liberty, and she's sort of our point person on our team. So, it's a work in progress. I think the tricky thing about Liberty is that as a first-year school, we're figuring out a lot of things.
Right.
And so we have 70 different schools that feed into us this year. So that's a lot of different students from a lot of different places to establish your hierarchy. So yeah, it'll take time. I mean, I think that the question that people have is, if you're going to prioritize it, then you have to say that's a priority, and many of the other initiatives that we're all involved with have to take a step back, and then it's a function of who decides which priority is the priority you're going to do, and that's not my decision. So,
because it seems to me and I get starting with Liberty, brand new school, but it seems that if you had a school with an established, a city high that has an established culture, and they have norms and they have expectations, and a lot of it is spelled out, is it a little easier to fit into the model and just say, well, you've got your school that leads, right? And that means something. And what does it mean to be a city high school that leads? And so, some of it's there. It's not in this framework, and they're not plugging through, but they're definitely doing tier 3 support, right? I mean, they're definitely dealing with kids at the tip of the triangle, and they're definitely trying things, but it's just not as systemic, maybe. But I think when you have a cult, because Liberty, gosh, you gotta.
Yeah.
What is Liberty High? Well, they're making it up. I mean,
Well,
it's just,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that is essentially what we did here. We had no expectations. We had no delineated Common Core language, and we did. I mean, when we say Tier 1 foundation in place, that's after almost an entire year. I mean, all these documents have been hours and hours of work by the PBIS team. I mean, we've created orientation, and to the point, I mean, every year it's massive amounts of work. But that first lead time with your team, where we sat down with students, we sat down with staff, we sat down with Ann, and we hashed it out, and it was ugly, and it was painful, and we said, no, what do we really want our kids to do? What do we really want a Tate kid to be? And what does the Tate way look like? And we hashed a lot of things out, and it was pretty ugly at times. And, sometimes you had to get to the place where you're like, okay, this is what we can live with. If you could walk away from the table and say, I can live with that, then we're moving forward. But that's even more than an entire year of work, wasn't it? Getting the sheets done. And, we started from scratch as well. When Ann came, it was basically carte blanche. We're going to do this, we're going to start over. And we didn't even know who we were. Imagine kids that are Trojans and are, Bolts and our Little Hawks come here, and now they're nothing. awful for them. What buy-in, what belonging do they have? And we were creating an entirely new school. And so I think starting from zero, I almost feel like that's the perfect time, is because you're setting a culture, you're setting your expectations. Your entire staff is getting together and saying, this is what we want to be, as opposed to saying, well, we're going to fit it within this model already because it's just another thing that everything's already working. And when things are not working, I think that's when Pbis can become a savior of sorts, but it takes immense amounts of work on a Pbis team, which, whether it's like, it was about 5, 6 of us plus some kids, and, I don't know how big the teams will be at the other schools, but it takes a massive amount of work to put that in place. The buy-in is slow.
And I guess
I'm gonna go back to the scale issue. I mean, I understand completely. Our team is, I think, eight people maybe. We have, at Liberty's a small teaching staff for your comprehensive high schools. I think we have 46 right now. West High are at over 100, City High are close. So then that's a function, I'm just gonna say, of time, because it is a massive amount of work. Then how do you build in time for everybody to get up to the speed where your team is?
Yeah.
Because the massive amount of work that they put in, they're all of a sudden way down the road, and you gotta remember, we're gonna get everybody down that road, so.
I think what we found though too is like the first year with the team and you do the core. And then the second try we did the matrix. And then the next year we made posters for everywhere and did orientation. Then it's starting to do, as Jesse and I are Pbis internal coaches when we go to the tier 2 meetings. And then we have to schedule meetings. You have to just schedule it this time, mini SST meetings or staff development. We have Pbis as like every time on our staff development calendar on Thursdays, when building Thursdays. And then the next year we had to reorganize the orientation because we figured it didn't work the last year. And then we added the classroom expectations. And then the next year we did the core poster. And then the next trimester we did the Pbis poster. And then, so it's like every year or every trimester just reevaluating and reassessing. And that's why we're here now. So it is going to be a lot of work, but you have to almost build it in. Tammy Beener always tells us that our coaching meetings, you must build it into your staff development schedules.
Well, it touches everything, academic and behavior.
And it was at the same time as we were moving ahead as the team, all the rest of the staff was cycling through the Grantwood AEA trainings.
Yeah.
So we have every staff, and for the first time since I've been here, we have a core team of teachers and staff that is the same. And that's very rewarding and says a lot about what we're doing. But the other thing is, I can say, this is to Anne's credit as an administrator, she's picked at least 2 blended learning and Pbis as 2 initiatives among quite a few that we do, but those 2 are of priority, and she will be creative to get us out of the building, working together as much and as many times as possible. And you can imagine the burden on our staff of 12 teachers to have 4 or 5 of us out on the same day. It's really a big commitment that she says, I'm gonna, she'll even cover our classes if we have to have that, or, because subs are hard to come by right now. But, it's a commitment that she's made. This is our foundation. This is what we believe in. And she commits to having the staff get out, get trained, get to work. Like our blended learning teams, we get a day almost every other month to work together and just plan interactive, technology-oriented blended learning lessons. And that's 4 to 5 of us out of the building on a day together, and that's a big burden, but it's a huge commitment that she's made to that time and that training and that effort.
I have some questions. Sorry, I'm going to go back a couple steps. So I'm just looking at enrollment data that we got in our last meeting. So this one has a head count at Tate of 165. So where are those extra 40 students?
Our after-school Phoenix program, it's an online learning from 4 to 6, and these are 18 to 21-year-olds who are trying to pass high school.
Okay. And then, I know this one might go to Laura, I guess. This is more at the elementary level. So, the tier 1, tier 2 check-in, check-out, like what would you say an average classroom has kids on a check-in, check-out? Like how many kids?
If you take whatever class sizes we have.
Yeah, let's just say it was 20.
Yeah. We would have about 80% of your kids that are responding to tier 1, so anywhere from 10% or so of your students might typically be on check-in, check-out. It can increase because it's intended to be, that's the first go-to strategy that we implement for students. And so sometimes we think of that almost as a tier 1.5. It's not quite as intense as some of the other structured instructional groups in tier 2. And it's intended to work, as Ann had said, maybe 6 weeks or so you have a student on it. That is not a huge component of teaching. That is more where students are getting specific positive feedback as they go throughout the course of their day. It's kind of, when we learn about it, they tell us that it's kind of like you go to the doctor. If you don't really go intensively, they might prescribe a general antibiotic. They might prescribe kind of like your go-to standard protocol treatment. So that's what check-in and check-out is. So it varies, but in general, the variable is the complexion of each individual classroom, but that triangle should somewhat mirror our classrooms as well.
So is there any extra support for maybe classrooms or schools that have more kids in that group? I mean, obviously you may realize I'm talking from a little bit of experience here, but of a classroom of 18 to have 5 to 7 kids in that area, and it takes a lot of time out of that teacher's day dealing with that, all of those things too. So I mean, what's the...
You mean extra support as in personnel?
Well, I guess like this, and when I say support, I think when I think about this and I think about what Ann's doing, and when I've talked to teachers and people at Southeast or at other schools, it kind of starts at the top when you have a strong principal who believes in it, and it gets teacher buy-in, and then the teachers know that the principal supports them, then the whole system works better. But if there's a breakdown in there where maybe the principal may be going along with the process and the teachers are doing it, but then when it comes back to where they need the principal's support and then it's not there, then the teachers kind of feel like it doesn't work. So I guess that's more, where I'm coming from. Maybe, like, at Northwest, when we hear things, the teachers, I shut the door because I don't want to deal with the stuff outside. And those are in the comments. And so, like, when does someone step in and say, hey, this needs to happen? That type of stuff.
So one of the things that I can speak to with that is, I can't speak for the years leading up until the last year and a half, kind of how Pbis I can from being a principal, I guess, how our implementation of Pbis from the district perspective was monitored, or what level of accountability or support for administrators' implementation. I know there was some. I know that as a building principal in the district implementing Pbis, I had different people I could kind of go to over the years. But I will say that I'm not sure that there was strong oversight of it, as a district. And that's one of the things that Cree and I are really putting systems and structures in place for. As a matter of fact, even though, I don't know if you're referring to elementary or not, but at one of the recent elementary principal and IDS meetings, we talked about what does it look like to be a principal who is monitoring and supporting the implementation of Pbis, and had a learning session about that. And what are, just like you kind of have look-fors when you're doing, as a principal doing maybe walkthroughs in a classroom and looking for good, instructional strategies, what are the look-fors? What does it look like if I'm a principal that's implementing and supporting Pbis? So we are working on those sorts of support structures with a little bit of reasonable accountability. But I will also say with that, and we've put requirements in that principals need to attend the team training, they need to be a part of the team meeting, sometimes they have to miss, it's not, absolute, but, so those are things maybe that hadn't been clearly communicated in the past or expected. But I also will say that as a building principal, because even the time that I was implementing it here in this district, I had access to the resources at Grantwood AEA. I reached out and said, hey, we're kind of fizzling a little bit, as it happens sometimes, like you're making sure you're reviving tier 1. I think there's a reasonable level that an administrator assumes him or herself to sustain it and maintain it, because that that's the system that works well for everybody. So there's always this balance between district support and accountability, but also that individual's initiative to make sure that it is going well in their building.
years ago too, I would say that when PBIS came to buildings, you as a staff had to take a survey and agreed that you had enough support to start the implementation of PBIS, where no longer is it really invitational anymore. You know, we expect our buildings to be doing it. We've got a process in place now, at least K-8, where buildings are either going into Tier 1 training for the entire year, or they pick the Tier 2, Tier 3 training for the entire year. So then the next year, maybe they flip-flop. There's been a ton of work done by these two ladies in the past couple of years, not only to organize all that, work with the AEA to establish the trainings, but just with the follow-up. I think you asked a good question, Paul, on you know, what do we expect of our leaders in the implementation of this? As we work with our buildings and try to provide more assistance, we also think about our buildings sometimes in that MTSS triangle. We know we've got hot spots with behaviors occurring in certain buildings, right? And so we're not necessarily coming at them with the same level of support. We might be providing them additional assistance, and whether that's additional personnel or technical assistance. We've got, Karina's done a nice job working with the AEA to establish a spreadsheet that shows how often then that technical assistance is appearing for some of those buildings that may be struggling more. And those buildings are helping to self-identify where do they really feel like they need that additional support. Is it back to Tier 1? Do we need to have more of a conversation about what Tier 1 needs to look like in our building? Or is Tier 1 in pretty good shape, but we seem to have a lot of kids in Tier 2 and Tier 3, which actually tells us that Tier 1 may be not in as good a shape.
Right.
So I think, again, we've done a lot in the last year and a half. We've got a lot of room to grow. Just tomorrow afternoon, we have extended an invitation. I think, I'm not sure for secondary, but we've got all but one elementary principal able to come tomorrow. We're having behavior basics training. Usually that training is offered by the AEA. It's a full day training. We're having it modified, so it's a half day training, but we're getting administrators tomorrow afternoon to receive that support. So we recognize that behaviors are always going to be here. It's not something that's going away. And that training is going to really just provide some more intense background and learning for us all. And I think the important thing is we're going to have as many of our directors, and Matt and me, Laura and her team there tomorrow, but it's just also having that common language and learning together so that we can be consistent. If someone's calling the office and trying to talk to Kingsley or to Laura or to Corrine or to myself, that we make sure too that we're communicating a common message. And so we're trying, as we look out into the future, make sure that everybody's getting PBIS Tier 1 and Tier 2, Tier 3 training, behavior basics training. So we're really trying to regroup that way so that we are all speaking common language as well.
And also on Friday, our ESC administrative team is getting an overview from our Grantwood trainers about PBIS, because we realize that we don't want to assume that all of our directors are well versed or at least have the overview, because there's a lot, I shouldn't say there's a lot, but there's enough changes. Like if you were a principal 8 years ago or so, there's some things that are a little bit different and updated, but that's an important part too, is we want to make sure that we all have a basic foundational understanding as well. I'll stress again that we are not trainers. We rely on Grantwood AEA to provide that expertise in the training and the support. And one of the things, when Amy mentioned the technical assistance, that means those trainers are going out to the individual buildings, maybe helping the teams during a team meeting, or helping facilitate a staff refresher or training, or working with a team to provide that. That's also for the purpose of them building up the capacity of their building-based AEA people, because the way that our AEA implements that support is there's a level of responsibility that external coaches, so if I'm a school psych or if I'm a school social worker and I'm the building-based person there, I should also be providing consultation and leadership to the PBIS team as well. They can't take on a whole bunch because they have a whole different role as well, but that's also the purpose. So we are, as we continue to work with them, they're trying to, in a sense, up their game with their people's knowledge of PBIS, because we're definitely doing the same thing on our end as well.
The PBIS team would be a good support. Like Jesse's a great role, and Kate and Christina, they're internal coaches, and they go around and ask people how things are going. But when we look at our building data, like Paul, to your point, if there's a teacher that's really struggling that has 5 students acting out, then that your support team's going to come in and look at the data and see. And we really are data driven, and every month the Big 5, it's a report we have to run, and Jesse makes sure, and we really aren't. Tate has never been disproportionate. I shouldn't say that. We have been disproportionate as far as maybe for a while in African Americans, like by 2% or 3%. It wasn't out of whack. If we had 42% African American students, we had 42% maybe office referrals. And the same with, you know, all this data driven and all the common language keeps it, the subjectivity out of it. You know, you have the common language, and so when there are hot spots and there's data coming out of a room, then we're gonna go and support that. It sounds theoretical, but once it's in practice, it's just so easy to go to that one teacher and get that support and get those students, because they're gonna blow up our data and we're immediately gonna look like there's a lot of data right here. And so once you get into it, yeah, you just know where to go to the issues. So.
And I think too, a part of it that we forgot to mention is there's a whole staff side to PBIS, that PBIS applies not only just to the students but to the staff, and so we have the same sort of, I mean, not as intensively, but we have reward systems and positive behavior specific things among our staff. We've done, we have a staff shout out board, and, you know, gives out job outs, gift certificates or cards, and there are lots of things that are rewarded. We had like a staff bingo sheet that was originated with the PBIS too, because you can't imagine the amount of things, paperwork, check in, check out, all of these things we fill out on a weekly basis. And once you get those filled out, Anne would reward you at different tiers. And then finally, if you had like a blackout, you could go into a drawing or something like that. So those PBIS elements we apply to our staff from the viewpoint of our team as well. Because, I mean, at Tate, every single teacher has the first period as a prep period and the last one as a prep period. We all teach the exact same periods. We don't have staggered where I could go to Jesse second period and say, can you help me with this lesson or something. We all teach a freight train. And by the end of the day, frankly, that's not a prep period. And it's a really rewarding job, and it's one of the most beautiful places to be, but it's a really hard job. And so, you know, to build the behavior like the PBIS into the staff side as well has been great, because when I first started here, it was like torture every single day. And teachers were crying and there were breakdowns, and now everybody just like has this common sense of, you know, I am valued, I am seen, I'm a part of this really important thing that we do here. And that's not just because of PBIS, it's about, you know, all of us believing in the kids that come to us.
Are secondary buildings all buying into this? And do they have like a timeline or a goal set of when everybody is going to be on board with it?
I wouldn't say that we've gotten that deep into the conversations to even consider buy-in. Last year, when I say we, Matt and I, during a couple of our administrative meetings, just talked about the trajectory of this is probably a direction that we need to go in. We do have some interest at City and West, but it's just minimal, because part of the issue is there's a lot of people that have a lot of misconceptions. They don't really know what it is. And so, if Matt was here, he could speak a little bit more to, the vision and where we're headed with that. But there's probably a lot in each of those high schools that's already aligned with PBIS practices. So it isn't as if it's something vastly brand new. It could start with a small leadership team that begins to look at, all right, here's kind of what PBIS is, learn a little bit more about it. What do you already have in place? What are the structures and systems that you're using? How can we tweak that? And get their input for how to consider making an impact, how to implement it. Again, learning from other districts that are like us in a sense, because this is not insurmountable. There are, high schools all over the nation that are implementing this that look like us. But that also, again, we're tapping into the resources that we have available to us to lead and guide us in that process as well. As Grantwood AEA, they're the trainers. They need to kind of lay a process out for us as well and kind of be a few steps ahead of us in that.
So other than Liberty, the other secondaries aren't really on board with it?
No, not necessarily. It doesn't mean that they're not on board or against it. It just means
but they're not moving on that trajectory at all.
Yeah, not really.
They're not formally in the training process, is I think how I would put it. I mean, they're engaged in the conversations. They do a lot of practices that probably align, but they're not formally participating in that training structure.
And is that the goal, to have them all do it?
I think that's a great question. I really do think that's a great question. Yeah. Well, if I got to, I'd say yes.
I mean, is that a board thing? Is that just admin deciding? I mean, that's.
I would say there's ongoing conversation right now. I mean, I think it starts with what Matt's done by reaching out to Lincoln, Nebraska to show us the way or show us what's possible. I think that's helping with some of those conversations at least. Where that leads us.
Add on what Laura said. We rely on Grant Wood for a lot, but we don't just rely on them. We go out to the conference, we go to Chicago, we talk to other schools like ours, we talk to detention centers, we talk to these high-level alternative programs that they have, and then ones that are more, for the, mental health and all that. So we don't just rely on Grant Wood. We go out and see what works for other schools. When we first started, Grant Wood was great, but we needed to see it in action. We went down to Metro. Metro gave us a lot of their stuff. We just put Tate over it, as far as some of the PowerPoints and things like that to help train our staff. So, getting out there and out of Iowa City and, even out of Iowa really helped, gave us kind of a big picture approach.
Clinton High School's done a great job, and we've met with them and visited there, and it's lots of really great stuff.
And that's why we've reached out also to the UI and forming a partnership with them just to see what else is out there, what can they provide to us as well, and make sure that we aren't just only relying on Grant Wood AEA. But I keep making that point because we aren't, as a district, able to provide training without them at this point in time.
Well, thank you, Tate. Thanks, Ann, for hosting us, and you folks are sticking around for your teaching day. I want to be super sensitive to time. Do we have any more questions or other folks here? Otherwise, we just need to figure out what our next education committee meeting is going to be.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, next. How have they done this in the past? Is it like a regular every month?
It's a third Tuesday.
Every third Tuesday.
Basically been convened for 2 years as a committee of the whole. First year it was monthly, and then last year it was sporadic.
So last year was more sporadic?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think last year, we were doing so many meetings for the bond,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I think that, we just couldn't do everything.
Well, and once.
Yeah.
So the next meeting is,
Thank you, Free.
Thanks, Laura. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you. The 20th.
the 20th. So I guess and then I guess as far as topics goes, I mean, this was real natural because last ed committee meeting, it was like, we were kind of talking about PBS, and then it's like, hey, next meeting is PBS. But I don't know if we have any slam dunk need to cover.
I think we may need to cover what Janet sent out our email about the ag program going forward.
So, I mean, I was gonna propose that when we were doing agenda setting for next Monday, that we find some time, whether it's through a work session, or it could be the next ed committee meeting, where we talk about implementation. I know that the team has been working on what that implementation plan looks like, and just to gain awareness there. And then also the question of if we're bringing this program in, are there other things that need to be cut in the district? And I think that discussion around the budget, for me, is an important one. The only reason, I almost prefer to do it as a work session, just so that there might be more community members that would be being there and part of the discussion. I'm not sure how often we get external committee members attending ed committee. I just don't have the experience with ed committee to know.
And we do try to keep the ed committee to educating us. That was kind of the mission of for the teachers to participate in that.
So, I mean, I'm sort of leaning towards doing that topic at a work session, but I want to have that conversation, but, so I don't know, what other topics are big in terms of education? I mean, the added program, I think, is interesting. I mean,
We did have that request from the homeschool assistance program kind of committee, that advisory committee.
Maybe that's what we should do.
Yeah.
That sounds good. I like that one. Because that's something I know I would love to learn more about.
Well, and actually what we did in December of 2015 is we heard from them and from Trek at the same time, since it happens at Trek, because I don't know that they would want to hold hour to present.
And this request is really more from the advisory committee that has been up and running, I would say, for the last 6-7 months, and program changes that they've made. So we brought in Ann Langenfeld, so both Ann Langenfeld and John Nettie are helping run homeschool assistants, and I think they're real proud that they've got a particular, it's not necessarily a PTO, but an advisory that they've been working with, and they really want to be able to share the work that they've been done.
So that would be, the February timeframe is good for that?
Okay. Yeah, I think so, but they'd love to share.
And do you think we could get some, like Trek could do a little, like if we did it at Trek, I think that would be awesome.
I'm sure they just do the same thing they did 2 years ago. They'd
Oh.
probably be thrilled to do it.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Like, because then we
I'll
can.
make contact with them and
Yeah,
Just
Trek,
like-
February 20th.
So have John kind of talk about the track, and then maybe John and this advisory team talk
That'd be
about
great.
their work. You'll send an email to them? Thank you. And you guys want to do it at track, right?
I'd love that, would be
Okay.
great, yes.
If you're brainstorming for topics in general, at some point I want to come back to preschool. We've tried to hit that once a year or so.
And I do think in Abbott, unless the board has gotten,
Oh.
Avid,
Yeah.
We did that one last year too.
Yeah,
We
at
did,
Kirkwood.
This is so many people were familiar with this, maybe it's too soon to do it again. I don't know, it's up to you guys, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is.
Great. We'll Trek next time and then have some options for March. Great, thank you. I guess I take a motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I know, I'm not.